Hi, welcome back. Okay, I recently came across a scenario or situation where I needed the ability to be able to group different parameters in a hierarchy. So it's using the multi-object param mechanism that's built within Houdini, but getting my head around it was a bit, let's say I had a bit of fun, a couple of days. Right, so that's what we're going to be discussing here now. I'm going to keep it very high level because if you're even thinking about doing something like this, you're pretty much going to know what we're talking about in terms of user interface within the actual Houdini suite. So as you can see here, what we have is the ability to set up sections of a level. And we say that's called level information, so that's the top level. And then going down, we might want to extend that level with additional geo. It's a bit complicated, don't want to go into it further than that. But that's where we've got to think about how do we actually nest these variables so that you can extend them and have multiple levels and multiple sections within multiple levels. So here's what we've got. If you look here, when I hover over this, you can see that we don't have any numbering information at the end of the line. There's nothing being postfixed here. So it's just folder level underscore information. If I go down and hover on any one of these variables, you should find that they all have a postfix. And then if I go down to another level, it's now using the upper level's number along with its number within its own array. So here we have two number of objects that need to go on. This one has 1 at the end and this one has 2 at the end. But preceding that, they both have 1. Right? I hope that makes sense. I hope you're able to follow. Let's go and see how that's actually been configured when actually looking at the type properties. Right. So here we got level information. There's no hash at the end. But if I go down, I have building string that has a hash, meaning number. I have location, param location, that has a hash at the end. And then now I have another group that's been set up at the bottom here, and that's num obj that has a single hash, but every nested variable or parameter below that has a double hash going in on the signature. The first one belongs to the parent, or that's the number that, or the index for that parent, and then its actual own sequence index hash there. Hope that makes sense. Right, so let's see if we can actually go into this specific SOP and make some of this actually make a bit more sense than what we've been doing so far. So we're drilling into the actual SOP. And then here, what we have now, we're going to be looking on the actual for each configuration that's been set up. So again, just to refresh, we have the level information, right? So that's going to be the external loop. And so if we go and have a look on the loop itself, look on its parameters. Here we go. So folder information, I'll just expand that so we can see clearly. Folder information, no hash at the end, no additional index information required. It's a top level, it's classified as a top level node. Here you can see off the root, it's at the top level, right? And that's going to be driving the actual for each within the count sequence, right? So as many as that specific variable has been signed as a number, then that's going to be driving how many times this is going to loop. So if you look here, the SOP itself doesn't have a top level node coming through. So it's going to do the for each count, right? So it's just looking at the numbering information. Now when we come to actually looking at doing the internal for loop, and again, that's only being driven like that because we're nesting the parameters below, right? So now we're looking at num object, and again, there we have that variable with the hash at the end representing the number. We come in here and it gets a bit more interesting at this point. So here we're looking at the external num object, right? You've seen that variable earlier. And then what we're doing now is we're actually going to do an iteration using its own for each count, which is defined here. Okay, now where it gets complicated, because everybody knows how to do a for each loop, is when you actually start coming to try and use these specific parameters here. And I'm going to show you where or how I was able to just get this set up. Right? If you're a seasoned Houdini user, you're not going to have any issues. But if you've never used this specific visual configuration before, it can be a bit tricky. So if I was to come in here and just drop down an object merge, just like that, it's not a part of the loop at the moment, it's just sitting on the canvas there. How we're going to get this set up with this object merge is simply to select the number object. So what we want to do is get the variable into the configuration, right? So I'm going to drag that and I'm going to drop it here. And it's brought along these child properties that are important for the loop, right? So these are the high level properties that map to its setting. Nothing here has been bound thus far, it's just the actual variable configuration. And you can notice it didn't bring the num object through. So I'm just going to put that in here as a hash, because it'll complain about it later on if we don't do that. But all the child variables or parameters, they've brought the relevant level of the hash. So once you've got that there set up, I don't want to change anything that I've got here. I'm just showing you how to literally drag that sequence across. So I'm going to cancel that for the time being so we don't make any changes, because that took me a bit of time to get set up, right? So now that we've got that, the next thing to do is to actually make the bindings with the top level properties as you'd normally do with your HTA. So what we've got here as a configuration is we've got the num obj like we showed earlier, and we've got the count, and then for the actual object itself that we want to bind to, this is how we'd set up that configuration. So it looks involved, a bit involved, but it's not really. We're just using the string concatenation feature, so two parameters going into strings, and it'll just, you know, use the BODMAT feature, brackets, object, or off, divide, whatever. Just brackets are going to take precedence, right? So you then have the object path, right? Then that's going to be concatenated with the external count. No, actually, this is the internal level count. Let's just highlight that there just to be sure. Right, that's count number 2. So that's count 1, so that's the external count. And it's grabbing the iteration from the metadata. So if you look here, iteration, number of iterations, value, high value, so on and so forth. So from that specific detail node, it's grabbing the iteration, and then for each count, for the nested for loop, it's grabbing that iteration. So again, it's standard coding at that point. You know, it's a for loop, and you've got variables, and they've all got a kind of level of precedence for where you are in the loop, right? So that's how you go about doing a binding. And here in this instance, obviously, well, not even obviously, it's going back to the parent sub and grabbing the path information. So to get that being a bit more relevant, if I come back up here now, this is the G22 sub, and this is the object path 1_1, and it's feeding off that loop. So this information at the top level of the sub will feed into that for each loop, and that's how you'd go about trying to bind a multi-object level param. If you've got a better way of doing this, I wouldn't mind you guys putting up a video and sending me a link, but that's how I was able to get that going. So again, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Thanks again.